Welcome to the launch of the Victorian Media Hall of Fame, and thank you very much to the State Library, the subject of many thanks we'll hear tonight, but thank you for allowing us access to this fantastic Red Room and exposing in the process journalists to a bit of culture, which is never a bad thing. We are here today to launch the Media Hall of Fame, the permanent exhibition downstairs, and I've been told that a lot of our Hall of Famers have over the years made exhibitions of themselves, but never quite like this. This evening represents the culmination of 4 years' work of selecting and honouring the men and women in the media industry, not just journalists, photographers, cameramen, cartoonists, graphic artists who have made a significant contribution to Victorian journalism and also, more often than not, to journalism in Australia generally. From John Pascoe Faulkner, the man who established Melbourne's first newspaper, all the way through to Marcus Clarke, the great war correspondent Phillip Schuler, to some modern-day legends, Laurie Oakes, Jana Wendt and Neil Mitchell. It is gratifying to see their work will be on display not just now on the Melbourne Press Club website, it still is by the way, it's a fantastic page we've got set up, but also permanently downstairs in what we hope will be a permanent exhibition for many years to come. On that note, I'd like to acknowledge some of the Hall of Famers, distinguished Hall of Famers who are here tonight. Peter Blunden is here as a Hall of Famer, and also, of course, he's the Managing Director of News Corp Victoria, one of the very generous Press Club sponsors. Peter, always great to see you. Ranald McDonald, Andrew Rule, Ron Tanberg, Robert Gottliebson, Bruce Possel, Mike Sheehan, Terry McCrann, and Terry Phelan. Did I forget anybody? Please, welcome them all. Also, importantly, some family connections. We have here tonight David and Michael Parer, the nephews of the great World War II photographer Damien Parer, and also several other members of the Parer family. Richard Howard and Sue Stafford, the grandson and great niece, respectively, of Phillip Schuler. Stephanie Alexander, the great Stephanie Alexander, always fantastic to see you, Stephanie, who happens to be the niece of Wilfred Burchett. Ooh, controversy. Not you, I think it's more Wilfred. Les Tanner's daughter Judy and Oscar White's daughter Sally White. Sally, of course, is also a Melbourne Press Club Life member. Sally's done some fantastic work for us over the years. I'd also like to welcome Geoffrey Blaney, a member of the Hall of Fame selection panel who did some fantastic work, particularly going back to the start of Melbourne's history in picking out some important men and women to be honoured as Hall of Famers. Also, Bruce Davidson is here, the Chief Executive of AAP, another Press Club sponsor. Paul Murphy, the Chief Executive of the MEAA. And Peter Bartlett, I think, I didn't see him before, he may be here, but in case he is a long-time Press Club board member and Club Life member. I'd now like to welcome to the microphone John Wiley, the President of the Library Board of Victoria. Please make him welcome.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate the introduction, and I must say we're awed and inspired by the amazing collection of media talent here this evening. I've never seen people from the media, and particularly leading lights in the media like this, be so shy and not take the seats available. I don't know what's happened to the media in the 21st century, but it's just an amazing cavalcade of talent and famous names and people who have contributed so much, not only to the Australian media, but also to Australian life and to connecting people who love your particular part of the world with the stories that you write and the people that you follow. And so we, as a self-confessed media junkie, it's amazing to be standing in front of you here this evening with all those names. And I thought Michael was very brave, actually trying to name some individuals and not everybody. So just to go through just a list of formal introductions to Mark Baker, who's CEO of the Melbourne Press Club, to Michael Smith, the Chair of the Media Hall of Fame. And there are a lot of powerful people in the room here this evening, but I think Michael is in fact the most powerful person, given that he chairs the selection panel for who gets into the legends. And I did make the observation earlier today that it's lucky that this is actually this invitation to this prestigious club in the media is by invitation only, because if it were self-nominated, I think we might be in the dome room for to accommodate the number of media legends we'd have. To all the members of the Melbourne Press Club, including various members of the press, their inductees, their family members who are here, and to their board members, to our fantastic CEO, of the State Library, our new CEO of the State Library, Kate Tawney. And I just want to get one bit of historical injustice off my chest, that we can't understand why Kate is not a member of the Media Hall of Fame. I'm sure that will be addressed in due course. But Kate just joined us 3 weeks ago, and after an absolutely stellar career in the Australian media and a remarkable leadership role at the ABC for many, many years. And we're just thrilled to have her as CEO here at the State Library. We will have, in about 20 minutes, the Honourable Ted Baillieu, a great supporter of the State Library and of press freedom in Victoria. And to anybody I haven't introduced, thank you for being here. So, look, it's my great pleasure to be host here this evening for this fantastic exhibition, for the Media Hall of Fame opening, and in particular for your Media Legends exhibition. It is appropriate in this formal room, in one of the traditional and most formal rooms of the State Library of Victoria, surrounded by so many great figures of Victorian history, that we do acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Kulin Nation, and we acknowledge them as the traditional owners, and we pay our respects to their elders past and present. So this is a moment tonight that's been brewing for a couple of years now. There was a dinner that quite a number of you will recall in the Experimedia room about 2 years ago, which launched the partnership between the State Library of Victoria and the Melbourne Press Club, and saw the State Library become the first home of the Australian Media Hall of Fame. And from the State Library's perspective, we're trying to reach out and include as many different communities as we can, and to recognise all of the people who make a great contribution to Victorian life. And so we're just thrilled, actually. We're thrilled to have the Media Hall of Fame here at the State Library of Victoria. We think it is absolutely the right place for it to be in Victoria. And I have said to Kate, if we don't get good press out of this occasion, we might as well give up. Look, it's fitting that the exhibition that you'll see will be displayed in our newspaper room, where people come to the State Library to access our vast collection of over 100,000 Australian and international newspapers. Here at the State Library, we hold Australia's most comprehensive collection of Victoria's newspapers, which date back to 1838, only 3 years after Melbourne was founded. And we've digitised a great number of these, allowing access to this great resource worldwide. Now, behind you there's a gown that probably a number of you might have heard about or have seen previously. And it's known, for those of you who don't know, it's known as the press dress. It was worn by the Mrs. Matilda Butters, who was the wife of the Mayor of Melbourne back in, and she launched this thing in 1866. And this was, as you can see, it was a collage of all the newspapers of the day. And given it's interesting against the backdrop of such rapid and significant change going on in the print media in particular in current times, that there are 2 newspapers featured on that dress from 1866 that are still in existence today, namely the Age and the Leader newspaper. And we hope in 150 years' time they're still on a similar sort of thing. So that dress, we think, represented the diverse media landscape of Melbourne even in the 1860s, and it does remind us of the absolutely fundamental importance of a free press. And given all the events going on in the world right now, we're reminded almost every day about the importance of free speech and a free press, and the right to a free expression of opinion. So while media business models are under more pressure than they've ever been before, now is a time where the traditions of a strong and free and independent media that we enjoy in this country are more important than ever before. Just like you in the media play a vital role in keeping the communities informed, or community informed, so do we at the library. And so we, in a lot of ways, share a common purpose and philosophy, and that's one of the reasons why we think it's a great natural simpatico to have this Hall of Fame here at the State Library. The inaugural exhibition highlights the contributions of 6 Australian war correspondents. These reporters and photojournalists, to their great credit, placed themselves in harm's way for the sake of getting a story. One of them, William Burchett, reported from the front lines of World War II and Korea and Vietnam. And he was the first Western reporter to reach Hiroshima after the Allies dropped the atomic bomb on the city. And his first dispatch was entitled "The Atomic Plague, a Warning to the World," and gave a sobering warning of the horrors of nuclear fallout that are still absolutely relevant today. And we're proud that his papers today sit here in our collections here at the library. Now, while the correspondents of that era wrote with pen and ink or typewriters, today digital technology, as we all know, is changing the way we discover, collect and share information. And for both the media and the library, this presents profound challenges and opportunities. To keep pace with these changes, we at the State Library are embarking on change ourselves. We're very proud of the fact that we've embarked this year on an $83 million redevelopment program for the library that will see us renovate some of the fantastic traditional spaces in the library, in particular the beautiful old Queen's Hall. I don't know if you've visited it recently, but it's Australia's original library space, just behind us. And also we're planning to open the Russell Street entrance and have that as an entranceway into a new Treasures of Victoria, or Treasures of the State Library Victoria exhibition at the library. It's not just about renovating the building, it's also about providing contemporary and better services to the modern community. And so we're going to have a whole range of new services. In particular, we'll have a new digital media centre. We'll have an entrepreneurship centre. We think that's really relevant to today's community to provide information to people who are aspiring entrepreneurs. We'll have a new literacy and reading centre for children and youth, amongst many other things. And so this building, when the redevelopment is completed in about 5 years' time, is going to be, we think, the best library in the world without reservation. That's our aspiration. We're very proud of the fact that today we have 1.8 million visitors, or 1.8 million people coming through the doors here each year. And to put that in context, the British Library in London, at St Pancras in London, only has 1.4 million people going through the doors each year. We are the most visited library in Australia. We're in the top 5 visited libraries in the world. And so it's a permanent home for the, we hope, for the Media Hall of Fame in Australia. It'll be a fantastic place for foot traffic. So look, to chart the way ahead for us, the board only does so much. We like to on significant occasions, get up and talk about the place and take credit for good things. But the real responsibility in the place lies with the management and in particular the chief executive. And I mentioned before, we've been just so lucky to have recently hired what we think is one of Australia's outstanding media executives who'll be leading the way forward for us. And so it's my great pleasure tonight to introduce to you for the first time the new Chief Executive of the State Library, Kate Tawney.
Thank you so much. It's an absolute pleasure to join you tonight in my new role. And it's an honour to be recognising some of Australia's finest journalists tonight. Just to my ABC colleagues, I want you to note that I have remained true to my word since my departure, and I have slipped seamlessly into the role of news consumer. I have avoided texting you with suggestions for the next question for particular interviews. And Michael Rowland, I still laugh at your dad jokes every morning. I do think it's terribly fitting that Michael is guiding us through tonight's proceedings because, in my experience, there are very few journalists with more integrity than Michael. I think the Press Club is in very good hands. This is my 3rd week in the role, and I am on the most extraordinary journey of discovery in this incredible building, finding out about the collection, but also drinking in the stories, within the stories, both with the people that I meet, incredible colleagues who have amazing skill sets, and learning about the history of every single item in this building. It's just such a treat. I feel incredibly lucky and very privileged. When I left the ABC, some of my colleagues asked why the library, and in fact my 12-year-old was less diplomatic. She asked why anyone would leave the glamour of the television industry to work in a library. Those that posed the question at that point in time, including my daughter, they hadn't visited this library, and they certainly hadn't met John Wiley and heard his passion and his ambition and his aspirations for this incredible Victorian institution. I'm so pleased to be here, and I remember walking into the ABC at Ripponlea on my first day and feeling an incredible sense of privilege to be filing for the national broadcaster and to be following in incredible history and heritage of that organisation. And I also felt a deep sense of accountability to ensure that I was upholding the standards of my predecessors. And I feel that walking into this building every single day. I'm not a trained librarian, but I already feel very much at home here in the stunning building and also with my colleagues. And like you, I've spent my whole career, and indeed most of my life, asking questions and sifting through information and trying to make sense of complex issues. And that's precisely what librarians have been doing here for 160 years. And its founder, Sir Redmond Barry, believed in the free flow of information, ideas and debate and discussion. And he believed that that was the cornerstone of a strong democracy. And so this was established as one of the first free public libraries in the world. There's no special invitation necessary. All the knowledge contained in this extraordinary collection is freely available to all. And there are so many unexpected gems. The press dress, which John has referred to, and also this beautiful inkwell crafted in the 1790s. This inkwell belonged to John Pascoe Faulkner, author and publisher of Victoria's first newspaper, the Melbourne Advertiser, which he produced with ink and pen. In the first issue of the Advertiser, he wrote, "We opine that Melbourne cannot reasonably remain longer marked on the chart of advancing civilisation without its Advertiser." In other words, the city was nothing without a newspaper as its historical record. Journalism matters, capturing the stories of our time, holding those in power to account, providing accurate events as they unfold and sifting through complexity to help inform people is as important now as it has ever been. And some of you may not know that one of the country's most well-known war correspondents, Sir Keith Murdoch, was former president of the State Library. And today, thanks to the generosity of the Murdoch family, we have our major exhibition space, the Keith Murdoch Gallery, and our fundraising lecture is named in his honour. We are absolutely honoured tonight to be hosting this exhibition to honour 6 individuals from the Hall of Fame for their courageous efforts as war correspondents. They risked their lives alongside our troops in World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, to bring us the truth. And having worked with some of the finest foreign correspondents of this generation, I'm acutely aware of the potential impact of reporting from conflict zones, the impact not only on correspondents, but also sometimes on their families and their loved ones too. And so this recognition is incredibly important. And my thanks to the Melbourne Press Club and to Mike Smith in particular for leading this initiative and ensuring that the stories of these brave journalists are shared. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kate. All over the last 4 years, many people have spent many hours on the Hall of Fame project, turning an initial idea, a concept, into the reality we are seeing today. None more so, though, than our next guest, Mike Smith, the former editor of The Age, who really drove the concept from the very beginning. I may have told this story before, so apologies to those who have heard it. I had just started at the Press Club as a humble board member at the time. It must have been back at the start of 2012, and there was one of my first meetings, this raging debate about the merits of setting up the Hall of Fame. In one corner there was Mike Smith and many others vociferously supporting the concept of honouring Victorian journalists all the way back to the start of Melbourne. There are certain other board members who shall remain nameless arguing against the merits of honouring dead people and how boring a night that'd be and what are we thinking. Thankfully, Mike Smith prevailed, and we have seen 81 foundation members, and more importantly, we're about to see the concept go from Victoria to what will undoubtedly be a hugely successful Australian Media Hall of Fame in years hence. So please, ladies and gentlemen, make welcome the Chairman of the Australian Media Hall of Fame Selection Committee, Mr. Mike Smith.
Thanks, Michael, and John Wiley, Kate Tawney. I can assure you this position is not one of great power and influence. It's just a lightning rod for debates and arguments that are incapable of being settled to everyone's satisfaction. This is a really important day in the evolution of the Melbourne Press Club, and it's just delightfully appropriate that we're doing it in partnership with the State Library of Victoria. The State Library is as old as Melbourne's oldest surviving paper. For 160 years, it's been a second home, a real second home, or more recently, a virtual second home for thousands of journalists and writers from Melbourne and around the world. The Press Club started about 45 years ago as a lunch club, a social club with a newsworthy speaker. It was the 1970s when journalists took lunch breaks. Those gatherings often developed into very long lunches. A lot of journalists worked night shift or a very early shift then, and a lot of journos would wander back to their offices in the late afternoon or early evening and still be able to make deadlines, as well as fill in their lunch expenses forms. By the 1990s, two recessions and Paul Keating's fringe benefits tax had undermined the Press Club's business model, and it began looking for a new purpose based on celebrating excellence in Victorian journalism, maintaining those lunches, but shorter ones and more formal ones. First came the Young Journalist of the Year, and then in a breakthrough moment for the Melbourne Press Club, the annual Quill Awards began in 1995, first with 8 awards, and they've developed into now more than 20 awards. More awards came, the Lifetime Achievement Award, the Student Journalism Prize, and a few others. We had excellence covered almost from cradle to grave, but nothing about journalism's history. The idea of a Media Hall of Fame was first raised in the Melbourne Press Club's first business plan 15 years ago. 5 years later, it remained the only one of about 100 actions that had not been implemented. I think it was considered too hard, too divisive, too much work. 5 years ago, it gained us some momentum when we started looking at ways to mark the club's 40th birthday. By then, people were being asked to pay for journalism in new ways, and they were reluctant. Journalism's future was on the line. And we concluded that journalism's role and its achievements in a democratic society was poorly understood. We thought a Hall of Fame would be a useful reminder that great journalism was worth paying for. The first problem was getting judges for the first stage of the project, the Victorian section. Many leading journalists and editors just didn't want to get involved, didn't want to expose themselves to the catfights with their peers on any selections they made. Too inflammatory, they said, please no one, impossible task. In the end, we could not have found two better people than Geoffrey Blaney and Harry Gordon to help out in the Victorian phase. Geoffrey, one of our greatest historian journalists, and Harry, one of our greatest journalist historians. Two things became clear pretty early. First, journalists have been front and centre of most of the great political and social movements throughout our history. Separation from New South Wales, protectionism, federation, even measures much later that have cut our road toll by 2/3 in the last 40 years. And that's apart from exposing countless charlatans, crooks and corrupt public officials. The second thing that emerged was that by telling the stories of these individual journalists, we were telling much of the history of journalism, a history that still has not been written in complete form. After the first 2 years, and we were doing it sequentially, 19th century first, then early 20th century, and the third year was the big one, contemporary journalists. Geoffrey and Harry wanted to leave the selection of panel for contemporary journalists. They wanted to leave that to younger heads, one that could perhaps withstand the flack from the inevitable controversies in let's admit it, the bitchy world of media competition that's become a fight for survival. Geoffrey's with us here tonight. Thanks, Geoffrey. Your wisdom and insights gave us a unique look at some people that we wouldn't otherwise have considered, and they're very important people. Harry has passed away, but not before being inducted into the Hall of Fame himself, after he stepped down as a judge. And at that induction dinner, he was the last to leave. So for the third year, for covering the last 50 years of journalism, up stepped David Broadbent and Sally White, two people eminently qualified to review the past half century. In the end, our selections proved disappointingly uncontroversial. I think if we made mistakes, they were sins of omission rather than commission, and we have time to fix those errors if they're identified through future inductions. And now we're working in the next 12 months to add New South Wales journalists to the Hall of Fame in the next stage of creating the National Hall of Fame. Sydney, past and present, makes Melbourne media competition look like a game of patty cake. They are media wars up there that are fought to the bewilderment of the public and the belittlement of journalism. My brave judges helping out in Sydney are Mark Day, the Australian's media writer, Macquarie University media historian Bridget Griffin-Foley, who edited an admirable book, Companion to the Australian Media, last year, and Kate Tawney herself, now in the safe harbour of Melbourne after working in Sydney as ABC Head of News and Current Affairs. We have some outstanding consultants giving us some advice, including Geoffrey again, Dr. Patricia Clark, an expert on women writers, Mike Bowers, who's picture editor of The Guardian, and a former Fairfax Sydney editor who prefers to remain anonymous. Now, Melbourne might have the odd episode of media sniping. Only Sydney has full-scale physical combat. The recent Gyngell-Packer fistfight was only the most recent example. Frank Packer and Truth proprietor Ezra Norton came to blows in the members' enclosure at Royal Randwick in 1939 after Packer published unflattering photos of Norton in the Telegraph. A half-century earlier, Norton's father, John Norton, was pistol-whipped in front of hundreds of people in central Sydney by his rival and federal member of Parliament, Richard Marr. Norton responded by pulling out his gun and firing 3 shots. In Melbourne, I was once sued by a rival editor after I published a small column item recalling something relatively trivial about his, let's say, personal habits in the workplace. But never did I publish anything like Sydney journalist Nicholas Coxon, who actually started a newspaper to publish material against John Norton, who he called a miserable mite of human malformation, a crafty, concupiscent cockatrice whose gluttony, drunkenness and lusts have been raging more violently than ever. The editor who sued me once wrote to me accusing me of having a flaccid organ. I assured him my circulation was in great shape and at near record levels after 7 successive audit increases. But not even that editor was capable of the crude insults used by John Norton in Sydney to describe an independent Labor paper called The Democrat, which, when it closed, Norton described as a puling little rag that circulated widely around the Bondi sewer and was much execrated by the rats therein. Melbourne's colonial papers were not immune from the 19th century sport of knocking the royal family, and especially their representatives in Australia. But nothing matched John Norton's description of Queen Victoria as this flabby, fat and flatulent-looking scion and successor of the most ignoble line of royal Georges. Or he described George IV as the biggest blasphemer, the greatest liar, the foulest adulterer, the most infamous swindler and impudent turf blackleg or Welsher that the world has ever seen. He was a bigamist, a wife-beater, and a madman with prolonged lucid intervals. Norton was perhaps Australia's most notorious drunk. Yet he attacked the drinking habits of people like Edmund Barton, Dame Nellie Melba, and Justice Pring of the Supreme Court. Norton seemed to spend half his time under the influence and the other half in the libel courts, sometimes simultaneously. Cyril Pearl, in his Wild Men of Sydney, described him like this: Norton was publicly denounced many times as a thief, a blackmailer, a wife-beater, and an obscene drunkard without ever refuting the charges. And he'd been accused of killing his oldest friend in a drunken brawl. But you don't have to be pure to be at the Media Hall of Fame. There is room for a few ratbags. The prime criteria is that candidates must have helped shape the history of their profession, their publication or outlet, their city, state, country, or the world. On that score, Norton has to be considered. He was the first to make a big commercial success of the combination of crime, sex, and sport, a formula that survived under the Truth masthead in several states for more than a century, and was mimicked by other publications to a greater or lesser extent. Before he died, Truth was selling more than 200,000 copies around the country, a figure many newspapers would be proud of today. Truth ditched verbatim reports of long speeches in Parliament and instead ran column after column of murder trials and divorce cases, including his own. He proved the maxim, perhaps even created the maximum, that people are more interested in those who break the law rather than those who make the law. Norton almost certainly invented that very useful word, wowser. He made an art form of the alliterative insult. For example, devious, disgusting, dastardous, which he applied to Melbourne's Anglican Archbishop Edry Clark. Along the way, he ran hundreds of front-page splashes about scandals involving politicians, judges, churchmen and police, and some of them were true. Compared with Melbourne, the Sydney media scene is quite vicious, but it throws up some wonderful characters like John Norton. We're enjoying the rediscovery of them. We hope you do too when the New South Wales Hall of Famers are announced next year. Thank you.